The room inhaled and refused to exhale. On the polished table between cola nuts and folded wrappers, an envelope fell with a hush that sounded like thunder. He said, "Take it back." And for a second I thought he meant the words, not the money. Everyone looked everywhere but at me. My name felt heavy in my own mouth, so I kept it closed and let pride do the blinking. There are moments you imagine for years. The blessing, the jokes, the clatter of bracelets. And then there are the moments you never storyboard. Your father-in-law returning the bride price like a hot coal nobody wants to hold. Laughter fled through a side door. Rain needled the windows, Lagos humming below like an engine deciding whether to stall. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. He only touched the envelope once more, as if checking that the past fit inside it, and said, "Let love stand on its own feet." Tradition, I had learned, is a ledger written in invisible ink until the heat of conflict makes the lines appear. Weeks earlier, I stood under a striped canopy while a drummer tested skin and sound, rehearsing joy. The list was practical. Bottles, wrappers, token sums. Each item a bridge, not a price. I told myself I believed that. I told myself love and respect were the currency, and the gifts were a chorus humming agreement. But beneath the canopy, a different arithmetic was underway. Uncles traded nods like signatures. Elders counted meanings beyond numbers. I kept my smile steady, practiced the art of being present and ornamental. When her mother squeezed my elbow and said, "It will be beautiful," I believed her. I also knew beauty costs something, and the receipt does not always name what was purchased. We found a corridor away from the laughter, a ribbon of shade that smelled like rain and soap. She asked if I knew why the list was lighter than her cousin's had been. I shrugged, rehearsed humility. She said quietly that her father believed debts invited ghosts to ceremonies, and he wanted no spirits near us. I said I had no debts. She let the silence consider me, then kissed that silence like a seal. I joked about the cost of cola nuts. She didn't laugh. "We can choose what this means," she said. And the sentence rang like a key against a lock I hadn't noticed. I nodded, because nodding was easier than asking which door she meant. We walked back to the canopy as if we hadn't been altered by a sentence. But the corridor kept the echo for later. My mother's warnings never used the word pride. She preferred parables about bridges and goats, how both cross water better when calm. After the envelope landed, she did not rush to gather the pieces of my face. She offered tea nobody wanted and placed her palm on my shoulder, weighing me back to the chair. "When a gift is returned, ask what weight was removed," she murmured, as if she had already read the next page. I wanted thunder. I wanted the monologue where I proved a point I didn't understand. Instead, I watched steam unravel from the cup, imagined it writing a question mark in the air. Across the room, he spoke softly with his wife. The old man who could buy and sell a rumor with a glance looked almost tired. It was the first mercy of the night. Phones, like gossip, do not wait for ceremony. The alert arrived with the tact of a drumline. A bank reversal notification, numbers walking backward across my screen. The account I'd prepared for obligations lightened without asking me. If embarrassment has a taste, it is metal and mint. The afterbite of a joke you cannot swallow. I lifted my head slowly. The room now a gallery of frames in which I was hung at slightly the wrong angle. He watched me read. He knew I understood. The message contained no insults, only arithmetic. I thought about the corridor, the sentence about choosing meanings, the ledger in invisible ink. I looked at her and realized we were about to argue not with him, but with the ghost of what the money had been allowed to me. Morning turned the rain into mist that pretended to be peace. I walked through the compound's courtyard as if silence could glue things together. But silence is just noise with better posture. The house felt emptied, yet every wall remembered what was said, or unsaid. Amara's room door stayed closed. Her mother's laughter, always the compass of this home, was replaced by the rhythmic sweep of a broom, each stroke an argument being erased. I heard Uncle Tayo's voice through the fence, already reconstructing history for whoever would listen. He called it insult, called it humiliation. I called it none of his business. Still, the words spread like oil. I understood now that the envelope hadn't just fallen on the table. It had split the house like a fault line, and everyone was choosing which side to stand on. By noon, the story had mutated. At the market, I overheard my own humiliation retold by strangers who used my name like a proverb. They said the chief rejected me for being unserious. They said the bride ran away. They said my family begged. Lies multiply faster than forgiveness. I stood beside a yam stall, the smell of diesel and ripe tomatoes making the air thick enough to chew, and watched people laugh at a version of me I'd never met. My phone buzzed again. Tayo's message. "You can't let this stand. They spat on our lineage." My thumb hovered over the screen. Pride itched like an insect bite you can't scratch in public. I bought nothing. I just walked home with empty hands, as if returning the bride price had taken more than money. It had taken narrative control. Amara called that evening. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone translating between worlds. "He did what he thought was right," she said. I told her rightness had poor timing. She said, "He doesn't think you understand what he returned." I asked if she did. The pause was long enough for the line to click with distant generator noise. "He's not rejecting you," she finally said. "He's rejecting how you were sold." The word sold detonated softly in my chest. We both breathed through static. Love is never one language. It's a conference of accents trying not to misunderstand each other. I told her I was tired. She said she'd see me tomorrow. The call ended mid-heartbeat, the way things end when nobody's ready to name the thing that's really dying. The next morning, Uncle Tayo arrived uninvited, his cologne preceding him like a warning siren. He carried a folder in outrage disguised as concern. He said, "Men were laughing at our family name. That if I had any dignity, I'd demand the chief apologize. Or, better yet, sue." He spoke as if culture were a courtroom. My mother sat silent through his performance, eyes steady, beads sliding between her fingers like counting breaths. "We will not trade peace for applause," she said finally. Tayo smirked. "Peace doesn't feed reputation." He left his folder on the table. A list of legal options. Inside, I glimpsed a bank receipt with Chief's name printed faintly. My stomach turned. I didn't know then that this paper trail was the thread that would later unravel everything. That night, I dreamt of envelopes raining from the ceiling, each bursting open to release words instead of money. Respect, duty, ownership, love. They drifted around me until I couldn't tell which belonged to whom. When I woke, the power was out. I lit a candle and found myself staring at the reverse transaction on my phone again. A detail I'd missed before blinked at me. The transfer note, returned at bride's request. The candle leaned and spit wax as if offended. My chest tightened. She had said nothing. Outside, thunder rehearsed somewhere far off, promising it would arrive soon. I understood then that storms don't start with rain. They start with silence too patient to stay quiet. I didn't plan to visit the bank. Curiosity simply cornered me. Inside the air-conditioned hush, the teller's voice was sugar over glass. Polite, rehearsed, careful. She confirmed what I already half believed. The reversal had come from a private account, not the family's joint one. That meant the chief hadn't acted alone. The receipt listed a second signature, Amaris. The paper looked ordinary enough, but it felt like a betrayal wearing her perfume. I stared at the date stamp. It was 3 days before the ceremony. My fingers twitched toward my phone, then fell back. I wanted to call her, to ask why she'd edited our love without my consent. But pride, again, stepped in like a bouncer. Instead, I folded the slip, pocketed it, and walked out into the noise where reality always hides behind traffic. Mara opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in certainty. We stood facing each other, an unfinished conversation between us like a table neither wanted to set. I showed her the receipt. Her breath caught. "He asked me to," she said, voice like thread about to snap. "He said it was protection." I laughed, sharp and involuntary. "Protection? From what?" She pressed her palm to my chest. A peace offering that landed as confession. "There are debts in his name you don't know about," she whispered. "He didn't want them tied to you." The words rewrote the night of the envelope. My anger hesitated, confused by compassion. But hurt doesn't evaporate when given reasons. It simply changes flavor. Later that night, I found Adeyes in the courtyard, speaking to the wind the way only mothers can. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "He learned it from his own father," she said without preface. "To buy peace with money." She told me of a time when the chief's sister's marriage collapsed over unpaid debts that ruined 2 families. Since then, he treated transactions like curses that needed returning. "He fears repetition," she said. "Not you." Her words dropped softly, yet each one felt heavy enough to dent the ground. I realized then that I had inherited not just a woman I loved, but a lineage trying to heal from the ghosts of its own accounting. I bowed slightly, unsure if I was apologizing or thanking her. When I returned home, the folder Uncle Tayo had left still sat on the table, patient as a snake in tall grass. I opened it. Inside were printed emails, dates, numbers, chief's company, an unpaid loan, and a proposal with my name typed neatly as guarantor. My stomach dropped. The plan was to tie my business to theirs, use the bride price as collateral for a joint venture. I realized then what the chief had undone by returning the money. He'd broken Tayo's snare. My mother's silence made sense now. She had known more than she let on. My fingers trembled as I packed the papers away. For the first time since the envelope fell, gratitude outweighed pride, but only slightly. Love might survive deception, but respect needs resurrection. At dawn, I stood on the rooftop and watched Lego stretch awake. Trailers moving like exhausted beasts, muezzins called drifting through diesel haze. My phone buzzed again. A message from Chief Obinna himself. "You are welcome to my house when ready. I owe you the full story." There was no punctuation, just intent. I looked down at the city, at the river of noise flowing toward the sun. My anger had turned into something quieter, heavier, understanding. The day before, I had been a man denied. Now, I was a man invited into the truth. I didn't know which was harder to accept. Chief Obinna's compound always smelled like ironed linen and withheld judgment. When I arrived, he was pruning a hibiscus hedge with deliberate precision, each snip an answer he hadn't voiced yet. "You've read the papers," he said, not looking up. I nodded. He sighed, low and tired. "Your uncle offered me partnership. Said it would bind our families tighter." He paused, clipping another red bloom. "But binding and choking are not so different when pride is the rope." His words landed without ceremony, cutting through weeks of fog. "So I returned what could be used against you." The logic was brutal in its grace. I wanted to thank him, but the word wouldn't come out. Gratitude still tasted like defeat. Instead, I asked what he wanted in return. "Only that you love my daughter without ledger," he said. "No receipt, no balance." The hedge looked lighter after each cut. Inside his study, the air smelled of dust, mahogany, and quiet decisions. Chief laid out folders the way a surgeon arranges instruments. "Your uncle forged a joint document," he said. "He would have the bride price as equity. If your business prospered, he'd profit. If it failed, he'd call it our debt." He slid a letter toward me. Tayo's signature, identical to the one I'd seen before. "You were the guarantee." Rage rose in me like fever, but the chief's composure cooled the room. "I've known Men like him all my life, he said softly. They build traps disguised as traditions. I stared at my name on that paper, an unwitting participant in someone else's scheme. So you saved me, I said. I saved the idea of what family should be, he replied. And for a brief second, I saw the father hidden beneath the chief. Tayo arrived uninvited, as if summoned by guilt or instinct. His laughter entered before he did, brittle and performative. So, my name makes the rounds, he said. Chief Obina motioned for him to sit. He didn't. You tried to use them, Chief said. Family isn't a transaction. Tayo's grin faltered. Everything is, he snapped. Ask any banker. The silence that followed was surgical. Chief extended the folder. Then consider this your receipt. Tayo scanned the papers, the color draining from his face. You'll ruin me, he muttered. No, said Chief. You did that the day you called love an investment. I watched my uncle shrink under the weight of his own greed. For the first time, pity edged out my anger. Monsters look smaller in daylight. After Tayo left, I stood on the veranda, the city shimmering in late heat, my thoughts cooling into comprehension. Chief joined me, slower this time. The authority softened into fatherhood. You remind me of myself, he said quietly, too proud to be rescued. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I hadn't needed saving, but the words stayed obediently behind my teeth. Pride is a loyal jailer. Instead, I asked, why not just tell me? He smiled faintly. Because men like us don't listen until our pride is bleeding. The air trembled with truth. Somewhere behind us, Amara called her father's name, and the sound broke the weight of the conversation like sunlight through glass. As I prepared to leave, Chief stopped me. He reached into a drawer and produced the same envelope. Edges softened now, seal broken. Return this to her, he said. Inside, instead of money, was a handwritten note. Let love stand on its own feet. I laughed softly. This time without bitterness. You knew that night I'd misunderstand, I said. He nodded. Sometimes misunderstanding is the only way pride learns humility. I slipped the envelope into my pocket, lighter now than it had ever been. When I looked up, he was smiling. Not the chief's smile, but a father's, relieved that the storm had finally spent itself. When I got home, the air felt different, like the house had been waiting for me to return with guilt. Amara sat on the couch, head bowed, her coral beads coiled neatly on the table between us. He told you, she said. I nodded, and now you know why. I wanted to reach for her hand, but the words in my throat still had sharp edges. You let me think it was rejection, I said. I let you think what you were ready to believe, she answered softly. Her calmness was unbearable. You could have trusted me, I whispered. I did, she said. That's why I returned it. Silence built walls between us. I realized trust is not the absence of secrets. It's the courage to keep loving after they're told. By the time Zainab arrived, Amara was gone. My mother looked around the room, her eyes scanning the silence like a detective reading absence. You let your tongue close the door she opened, she said. Now go find the key before pride swallows it. I started to argue, but her stare stopped me. That man returned money to teach you something, not to test you, she continued. She handed me a small velvet pouch. Your grandmother wore this during her own engagement, before your grandfather ran off with her savings. I opened it. A brass pendant shaped like joined hands. We carry our wounds forward, she said. But we decide if they become anchors or amulets. I realized I'd inherited more than tradition. I'd inherited the chance to break it. Uncle Tayo called that evening, voice shaky for the first time I could remember. They're investigating me, he said. Tell them I meant well. I didn't. He muttered apologies that clanged like coins dropped on marble. Family's supposed to forgive, he pleaded. I thought of Chief's hedge, the careful pruning. Family's supposed to stop you before you rot the roots, I said. The line went dead. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. Some victories taste like ash. Outside, thunder rolled, rehearsing for rain that had not yet started. Inside, I opened the velvet pouch again and wondered if redemption required more than just being right. I found Amara outside her hospital shift, beneath a flickering streetlight that made everything look half forgiven. She didn't flinch when she saw me. "You came," she said. Not a question. I held out the brass pendant. "My mother says we choose what becomes amulet or anchor." She smiled faintly. "And which are we?" I hesitated. "Still deciding," I said. The silence between us softened. She touched the pendant, tracing its joined hands with her thumb. "He's not angry anymore," she said quietly. "My father, he said you remind him of his youth." I laughed. "Then he should warn me what it cost him." She shook her head. "He said it cost him everything but his pride, and that was the wrong thing to keep." Rain came at last. Not dramatic, just steady enough to erase footprints. Amara and I stood beneath the awning, no longer talking. She reached into her bag and pulled out the original bride price list, edges softened by weeks of handling. Most items were checked off, others crossed out. At the bottom she had written, in looping script, "Love owed. None." She handed it to me. "We'll do this again," she said. "Our way," I nodded. The envelope, the pendant, the rain, all of it felt like closing credits for an argument that had run too long. Some stories don't end with forgiveness spoken. They end when silence finally sounds like peace. The pier at night always smelled of salt and diesel, two scents that never agree, much like us. Chief Obina had called, simply saying, "Come where the water ends." When I arrived, he was already there, umbrella useless in the wind, coat snapping like a flag surrendering. "This is where I lost my first wife," he said. His eyes weren't wet from rain alone. "I bought her peace with money. She left it on this pier." The waves slapped against the wood like impatient memory. "You think I returned that envelope to test you," he continued. "But I returned it to stop my daughter from carrying my curse." I didn't know what to answer. Maybe some lessons are meant to be heard standing, drenched with no witnesses but the sea. I thought love was proof. I told him that if I gave enough, she'd stay. Chief's laugh was low and cracked. "No one stays for proof. They stay for peace." Lightning flashed, brief and merciless, outlining him like a monument, eroding in real time. "You remind me of myself," he said again. "Too careful. Love doesn't want accountants." I looked toward the black horizon, where water blended with sky. "Then how do I keep it?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "You don't. You honor it while it visits." His voice trembled, and for the first time I saw the man beneath the chief, the father, the widower, the teacher who failed himself first. Rain flattened everything, making the world honest for once. He handed me a folded photograph. Him and his late wife on this same pier, smiling in sepia light. "We thought we could fix everything with tradition," he said. "But tradition without tenderness is a contract with ghosts." I looked at the picture, then at him. "Maybe this time we start smaller," I said. He nodded. "Smaller is honest." For a long while we stood together, two men learning how to be wrong without collapsing. The rain softened to drizzle, and somewhere in the distance, a fairy horn moaned like an old wound closing. The photograph blurred in my hands, the ink running, but I didn't try to save it. Some memories are meant to wash clean. When I returned home, Amara was waiting by the window, still in her hospital scrubs, hair damp from the same rain. She turned as I entered. "Did he tell you?" she asked. I nodded. "Enough to change what I thought I knew." She smiled sadly. "He used to tell me love is like surgery. You can't heal without cutting." I laughed softly. Then we've both been operated on. We stood close, silence no longer sharp but full. Do we start again? I asked. She took my hand. No, she said. We continue. Without price tags. The city lights flickered through the curtains. Small galaxies deciding to stay a little longer. Later, I found the envelope again, still folded in my jacket pocket. I opened it under the lamp. The note inside was smudged now, ink bled by rain, but the words were still legible. Let love stand on its own feet. I placed it beside the pendant and Amara's handwritten list, forming a trinity of lessons, tradition, mercy, and choice. Outside, thunder retreated toward the lagoon, leaving behind a silence that felt earned. I understood then that the bride price hadn't been returned to undo us. It had been returned to reset us. Some debts you don't repay, you redeem. Dawn arrived like an apology whispered in light. The lagoon was a mirror, too tired to argue with the sky. Families stood together. No rows, no formal seating, just presence. Amara's mother adjusted her shawl. My mother hummed softly, both women building calm where words had failed. Chief Obina faced me, not as a patriarch this time, but as a man stripped down to gratitude. He placed his hand over his heart. No price today, he said. Only promise. His voice cracked just enough to prove he meant it. I turned to Amara, who smiled through misted lashes. Then let's spend the rest of our lives keeping it, I said. The wind carried the scent of hibiscus, salt, and renewal. For the first time, I didn't feel purchased or forgiven. I felt chosen. Instead of envelopes or ledgers, we brought symbols. My mother offered salt and palm oil to season and heal. Aday's placed a small calabash of honey between us, for words sweet enough to last. Chief raised a carved bowl, filled with clear water. So you remember what purity sounds like when it moves. No drummers, no spectators, only ripples. Amara lifted the brass pendant and slipped it around my wrist. I reached into my pocket and drew out the old envelope. Empty now, the seal long broken. We dropped both into the bowl together, watched them float for a moment, then sink slowly beneath the surface. The act was wordless, but everyone understood. Debt had dissolved into devotion. When the vows began, they didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded discovered. Amara promised to build a life not measured in gifts or gestures, but in patience. I promised to never use pride as language again. Chief nodded once, approval without ownership. Our mothers clasped hands like old friends, remembering a war they'd survived together. Even the lagoon seemed to still itself, the wind pausing to listen. It wasn't a grand ceremony. It was something smaller, holier, a declaration that love, when freed from transaction, is both priceless and payable only in time. Afterward, Chief approached with 2 wrapped gifts, identical wooden boxes. For both families, he said. Inside mine was a simple key, carved from ironwood. Inside my mother's, a small padlock, etched with the Okoi crest. Tradition should guard love, not cage it, he said. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. Amara laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks the spell of solemnity without shattering it. He's learning metaphors, she teased. He's teaching them, I replied. Laughter rippled across generations. For once, it felt like heritage wasn't a burden. It was a bridge. As the sun climbed higher, I took Amara's hand, and together we stepped barefoot into the shallow edge of the lagoon. The water was cool, deliberate, forgiving. Behind us, laughter, prayers, and soft singing blurred into one sound. I thought of every transaction, every misunderstanding, every silence we'd carried, and how they'd all led here. So, she whispered, no more envelopes. I smiled. Only open letters. The wind caught our clothes, ballooning them with light. Somewhere, a fisherman's boat cut through the water, rippling the reflections of two families finally facing the same direction.